Welcome back to the Elevate podcast. I'm your host, Gary Garth, founder and CEO of Elevate, where our mission is simple. We're here to help treatment centers achieve full census and build predictable and sustainable growth. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's just going to be you and me having a chat. And instead of talking about industry trends or me interviewing industry leaders, subject matter experts, we're going to talk about something that every behavioral health executive feels, but very few measure correctly, and the data is not accessible to many. That is the real ROI behind your marketing and admissions efforts. Do you understand reporting attribution and what's leading or driving your growth? What's the real ROI behind your efforts? If you have ever asked yourself questions like, what should my cost per VOB actually be? Or how many of those VOBs should turn into viable VOBs? At which percentage? What about what's a healthy cost per admission, Gary? For my size facility or my location or my specialization per se? Another common question I hear a lot is, are we scaling as effectively as possible? Are we just spending more money because our marketing agency is asking us to do so? Another popular one is, at what point, Gary, will we be experiencing diminishing returns on Google Ads or Microsoft Ads or SEO, whichever channel that may be? If you sit through this episode, you'll get answers to all those questions and more. That's my promise. Sit tight. My team and I, we built a tool that's called the Behavioral Health Growth ROI Calculator. You can try it for free on growthcalculator.elevate.io. I repeat, growthcalculator.elevate.io. And today I'm going to be walking you through how to use it the right way, how you can save your calculations, and how you can benchmark that for future purposes or hold your marketing agency accountable to industry benchmarks. So we'll basically break down how to insert your numbers, your metrics, the key drivers within your facility into the calculator in less than 5 minutes, and then you can save them. Also, we'll look at how you can benchmark your current results, your performance, in other words, against industry standards. Last but not least, we're going to look at the 3 core levers that every CEO, every executive, every CMO, admissions director out there should be looking at all times. The ones that can be adjusted and drive growth without having to double your marketing budget allocation. This calculator is the same model we use internally for over 50 facilities and have grown them pretty much double or 3x in less than 2 years. And it's designed to help you make smarter, better, faster, and more profitable decisions at the end of the day so that we together can help more people out of suffering. All right, let's dive in. So what you're seeing in front of you is our patient acquisition ROI growth calculator. You kind of have some high level instructions. I won't dive into all the details here. This is basically a summary of our surveys, our market surveys to CMOs, our data collected by our strategic partners, everything from billing insurance companies, VOB providers, Google, Microsoft Ads, Recover.com, you name it, a collected data source of input over the last couple of years that sums up the market condition circumstances. So you scroll down further, you'll start, the very first section is that you got to input your data. Again, you're going to go to growthcalculator.elevate.io and you go to this and you'll see this section, enter your data. Now, your marketing data input is going to vary based on multiple factors. So before we just dive into that, let me very briefly set the stage, give you the context of why you want to ask all these questions and what the end goal is. At Elevate, when we work with clients, I always say, in God we trust, everybody else brings data. If we're not transparent, goal-oriented, and have clear and concise target cost per leads, VOB, and admits, then we haven't structured the campaigns appropriately. The goal is for you as an executive, as a CMO, to have similar dashboard. This is from a demo dashboard standpoint, but kind of gives you an idea to say, if I'm working on my SEO campaigns with my marketing agency, how many leads am I getting? In this case, 354 leads. what's the cost per lead based on the expense of all inclusive my in-house team, the marketing agents, etc. Of those leads, how many of those are turning into VOBs, at which cost per VOB, and then subsequently how many VOBs convert into viable VOBs, the percentage of that. And the same goes for the cost per viable VOB, the admin, and of course, the mother of all metrics, essentially, the cost per admission, and the length of stay, the financial data that is needed to scale your facility. Now, at a high level, this is what we do, and we always go in and establish goals for each channel, so we know how are we doing versus the targets. Are we trending below? How can we not react, but be proactive about our initiatives to make sure that we end a quarter strong? Because there's always counter interactions from your competition. When you start stealing market share, you can rest assured there's some marketer out there which prospective patients you have solicited and therefore need to constantly be on top. And that's why we set up the goals, the targets. And then the last thing I like to focus on is the metrics here: VOB rate, qualified, and admission rate. We do this at a level where you can go both into local SEO. Recover.com is a big partner of ours. We have a lot of clients who advertise on them very effectively. Google, Microsoft Ads, basically look at it like an omni-channel or multi-channel dashboard across the board. Now, why the heck am I giving you this? This is not a sales pitch, Gary. Why are you talking to me about dashboards? Our dashboards, let me be clear, nothing proprietary. It's not like, we invented a rocket ship here. We're just doing the right thing, shining light on the right metrics, the KPIs that you should be focusing on in order to fuel growth. So when we go back to the calculator, it's the same input we're looking for. If you don't have this information at your fingertips at a monthly level provided by either your in-house team, marketing agency, there's an area of opportunity. So let's just do a hypothetical example. In this case, typically the very first thing is we filter by program type. I'm going to go with substance use disorder. The reason there's different programs, it's going to be a big difference on a mental health focused residential campaign versus substance use disorder in the cost per lead, the cost per viable VOB, the cost per admission. So important to factor in which programs you're promoting. And the very same, of course, goes to your levels of care. Now, full continuum is ideal, right? It's the perfect scenario, right? There's extended revenue layers, whereas sometimes if you have an IOP program, for instance, sometimes folks call me all the time, I want to run a big Google Ads campaign for my IOP. I said, call somebody else. It's not going to work. It's about understanding the marketing channels that's going to work most effectively for your levels of care, your location, and your program type. So when saying all of that is, for instance, if I choose residential treatment program, you have to understand if you're running ads, for example, for an IOP, you're competing against a residential treatment center in the same facility with a higher daily payout, a different revenue stream. Hence, they can allocate more for it. So important to understand and select your primary level of care. Then subsequently is your location. And we ideally want to go by location per state, right? Because CPCs range differently. The same goes with the insurance, the payer mix is completely different environment. And audiences, the competition from one state to another is completely different. So select your primary location and or do one calculation per location. You can, of course, also go nationwide if you have, say, 20 plus facilities and want to try it at a high level. Next thing is looking at your max capacity. Your max census. In this case, I'm going to go with 16. You would have your average revenue per patient. Again, sometimes I get pushback here. This is where you want to say, well, let's look at it from a financial standpoint. We have to factor in there's a certain portion of our clients that they leave against medical advice. There's a certain portion that steps down into a different level of care. There's some that stay for 45 days, other 20. Just take the averages so we have something from a financial standpoint that we could project and leverage as a baseline to see is growth sustainable and how can we optimize it. That's the goal here, right? So California substance use disorder, I would probably put somewhere in the proximity of, say, $35,000 average revenue. Length of stay. Now, this is very important. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here that if you can have somebody to stay, I've worked with big facilities where I consult, and the primary objective is, can we take folks from 32 days to 40 days of the length of stay in average? Why? Obviously, for one, it increases the probability of sustained recovery, right? They're not ready to go. Every extra day of care and support on site will help them on the mission of becoming sober. But furthermore, there's also a financial incentive into it that can then be translated into better marketing efficiency, better competitiveness. Next, over here, you'll see the midsection is your marketing information. Now, let me give you a very brief breakdown on the sections here. You see where it says it starts with SEO organic. Well, next, you also have Google Ads, Microsoft Ads. We have recovery.com as number 4 in the dropdown. And then there's omnichannel as number 5, as well as business development, alumni referrals, and readmissions coming soon. Now, the reason for the segmentation is Google Ads is probably the single most expensive channel, right? Microsoft Ads, a tad cheap. Recover.com is much more effective. Your SEO, your business development, your alumni, that's the most cost-effective channels. So many folks will sometimes go in and select omni-channel, which is, again, your blended performance across all channels as a first-time improvement, or you can go in and say per channel. So in this case, I'll go with SEO, and I'll say, okay, my next question would be, how many leads am I getting from my SEO campaign? So if I go back to the dashboard here, use the data here as an example, I would say, okay, producing 354 leads, and the expense they're paying elevates $6,500 for SEO Pro service package. And then the next question is, yes, these 350 leads, how are they performing? Is it quality versus quantity? How many of these are converting into VOBs? So again, we go back to the dashboard in this case, and I scroll down to the section, and I can see that 10.45 of these leads turn into VOBs. Now, in this case, it doesn't factor in decimals. So I'm just going to put it at 11%. The next question is, how many of the VOBs are viable or qualified VOBs? That's, of course, the primary target, but that will be heavily influenced on your in-network versus out-of-network policies. So I go back to the example here. Here we had 43.42% of VOBs convert into viable. So we'll put it up here, 43. And then the next question is, how many of these viable qualified sales qualified opportunities, how effective is my admission team? How many convert into an admit? Now, here is where I get a lot of different input. For me, this is a metrics where you want to be at the very least ranging in the 30-40. Top performing teams in my book, they're up 60, 70, 80% plus. Why? You're talking with a person who's in need of your help. 2, they have the financial means. They're within proximity. They're willing to travel. It's just a matter about you conveying trust and making the process easy, eradicating the financial barriers in terms of paperwork, the clinical assessment, etc. But on paper, they're deemed qualified. If you're not as close to 100% as possible, you need to improve the operation in that case, because it's not only this opportunity, it's a potential life. So that's my viewpoint. This case, it's 37.5. It's okay, but it probably should be on the higher end. So we'll put it here at 38%. And then the next slider here is your average census. Now, in this case, hypothetically speaking, I'll just put it, say, okay, let's just assume they were at 90% census. That means, in essence, based on the 16-bed input, that they are essentially still leaving $70,000 on the table every month in terms of lost revenue opportunity. I'll get to that in a bit, why that's important to sustain and keep predictable, consistent to some extent, especially if you want to expand your programs, etc. So the next section, you'll see your current performance is what that's going to translate into. Everything we insert in terms of the input, from your program time, levels of care, locations, capacity, census, average lengths of stay, your average revenue, the marketing channel, etc., is translated now into the actual output. 39 VOBs, 17 of those qualified, 6 admits, 2 empty beds as a result of the input, of course. The cost per lead, very attractive, cost per VOB, etc. You'll see the total revenue, etc., as a selection. Now, the next element to consider, and this is particularly for benchmark purposes, right? We can go nationwide. We can select all major insurances. Now, everybody knows that in-network versus out-of-network it makes a huge difference, and it will make an even greater difference next year and the following year. I know it from sources and input. So our calculator looks basically, if you are in a select state. If you said California again, it's going to limit it down to select options because we're only factoring in the insurances that has significant market share. If we were nationwide or in California and we're saying select insurances, it could be Cigna, from my recollection, has 3-4% only in California. That's not going to significantly impact the performance data, if you follow me. But if you, on the other hand, are network with all major insurances, your qualified VOB to admit rate should be significantly higher. So it's very important to put in the right information from an insurance standpoint. Next, we go to the continue to performance analysis section here, and you'll see your data on the left side. Now, here you can see all the data we input from this demo dashboard. You'll see the data correlates, and then you'll get a view to say, okay, how am I doing? The 350 leads, how does that stack up versus industry benchmarks? What about the cost per lead? What about the cost per VOB? You see across the board in these examples, they're doing beyond and better than industry benchmark for cost per admit, 4,363 when selecting SUD California on SEO. SEO is going to be lower if I, for example, when Google Ads, and let's just say that, hey, wait a minute, less of the leads are converting. This is not the data I inputted, but just to give you another example, you would see that now all of a sudden, wait a minute, with Google Ads, I scroll up to the Google Ads section, input, the benchmark increases significantly, right? And now you know how you're performing based on the data input versus the industry benchmarks. So this is typically an exercise. I'm going to go back up here and select it on SEO, right? I can't remember where I put these metrics, but it's just for demonstration purposes. You get the idea that specifically you can see, where am I doing in terms of revenue? And what is the return I'm getting from a marketing agency? My current marketing agency, how much money is left on the table? You can go in and see side by side, how are we performing against industry benchmarks? Then, and this is where the money is. This is where you want to focus. This is what you want to obsess about. When folks bring me in as strategic advisor consultant, or when we work with our clients, I'm typically on monthly business reviews, quarterly business review. The key is always to say, okay, let's look at all the different channels. Let's look at the objective. Where are you with the census? And let's understand and dissect your operations into different departments. The very first thing I look at is your lead generation efforts, right? Google Ads, Microsoft Ads, podcast participation, backlinks, media, your GBP, your directories, you name it. There's a lot of places that want to take your money from a marketing standpoint. And the question is, how effective is it? So we like to do an audit, slice and dice that data, and look at it again from a performance standpoint and say, wait a minute, how are we doing on SEO versus how we're doing on Google Ads? Click on the next one, do the audit. Wait a minute, on Google Ads, we're spending about 3 times the cost per admit and 10,000. That sounds to me like low returns, diminishing returns, where we can't really scale it, right? So let's kind of see where else we can put our money. And that's kind of like the idea to say, first and foremost, how can we improve your lead generation efforts? Let's just hypothetically say that you improved it by 10% more effectiveness. That can come from targeting the right people with the right message at the right time, excluding certain cities, excluding certain hours throughout the day, days throughout the week, making sure your copy is aligned with your promises, making sure that your admission team is answering the phone throughout those hours throughout the day. And I could go on for an hour about all the areas there, but the key thing is to have marketing admissions department in sync, so we improve your lead generation effectiveness. Next, I call this number 2, lead qualification. Now, this is what separates the boys from the men. This is where it gets difficult. Lead qualification, this is your process, your lead response time. How many missed calls do you have? How many touch points in average before a potential admission turns into admit? How do you set the right expectations, mitigate high AMA rates? How do you block that process? How do you ensure that all your opportunities that don't convert are saved for later and go into nurture campaigns, so that you have a holistic multi-touch point approach over several years with the right reporting dashboards, automation, systems, etc. I call this the elevate tech aspect of it, ensuring that it's all streamlined. Now, this can typically make a significant impact. Instead of just putting more money into ad budget, how do we squeeze out the effectiveness? And then last but not least, you can have all the leads calling you. You can have the best systems in the world, architected by the very smartest. You have everything custom designed for your facility. You can spend $1 million on the architecture. But if your team is not speaking with empathy, if they don't have the right question modeling, if they don't have a library of instant questions, if they don't have the right process and how to run a VOB, how to follow up, if they don't have enough touch points, if they can't convey trust, essentially, it doesn't align with your brand messaging, that will significantly impact. So the biggest thing is like, do you have an admissions enablement partner, somebody who helped you write the playbook, somebody who helped your teams become successful so they convert as many leads opportunities into admits? Typically, I hear, yeah, we're good, Gary. We got the best team in town. I'm like, okay, the data says otherwise, right? So they're great. They're great. But what if we could just 10x that approach, or not 10x, but improve it by, say, 10, 20%? One, get more people into care. Two, you become more profitable, can reinvest more into marketing, expand your reach, your impact overall. Three, your team becomes more effective because they take less spammy calls. They're rating the leads the right way. They're focusing their efforts on where they can help the most possible, and they're converting at a higher rate. Now, this is what I like. This is tangible. It's black and white. We work together. We have a timeline. We have a roadmap. We have data we can quantify that if you work together with us, your incremental revenue gains, in this case, would be 70,000, leading with a new lead count volume because of the efficiency. We're focusing on improving the different metrics by X percentage, which in return, when you collectively work on lead generation, elevate media, elevate tech, and elevate sales in conjunction, you'll get a 33 times return on your investment. So you go in here, you can see the key takeaways, how many extra admits are you getting, what's the cost per admission, how much did it drop. You'll have different visual representations of that data that you can leverage and submit. Now, here's what I encourage you all to do. The very next thing is that you want to go in either here on, you can save calculation at this point. It's also accessible in save settings at the top. So very first time, you can save the data, you can run the calculation, but in order to save the data for future purposes, you need to save the settings and you need to sign up for the ROI calculator. You do this with this step here, authentication required. I always recommend you just use the Google single sign-on. It's set up, secured by clerk. It's perfect. Or you can submit your information. So in this case, I'm just going to say continue with Google, sign it up. I'll select my email here, say continue. And now here's where I need you to pay attention. We go in here, and now remember we did a calculation. So I would say if I was the new shows, I would call it SEO October 2025 XYZ facility, right? Save those or save whatever naming convention you want. Save the actual settings, because now we can go back, we can do every month, or we can do a quarter at a time. And now we have the benchmark. You can save it. You can go into this section where it says load settings, and you can load all your previous calculations. So if you ever doubt about, can this be improved, save the settings, take that marketing report that you got from your agency, from your in-house team, try to consolidate the data, ask the question, what is my qualified cost per qualified by VOB? How many of these are converting? How many missed calls? Ask the right questions instead of saying, what should we be doing differently? Or we need to think about AI and open overview, and you need more marketing budget. I hate when I hear that without having the data. First, you get the data right. With the data right, we can make decisions, and we can back it up with rationale and compare it with industry benchmarks. So I encourage you to go in and submit your information. It takes less than 5 minutes. And again, do it per facility, do it per marketing channel is my recommendation. All right, that's a wrap up for today's session. So if you sat with me so long, thank you for your patience, first and foremost. Apologies for the rant. I hope it helped. If you walk through this calculator with me now, then you probably notice one thing. Growth is not a mystery. I repeat, growth is not a mystery. It's a simple math equation that you need to outline with your admissions funnel, tie it up with your financial incentives operations and your admissions team and your BD. Make it one cohesive calculation that's measuring all the right KPIs. Because when you understand your true cost per VOB, your true cost per viable, your cost per admit, and the conversion rates between each and every one of those, then you have real control over your sense. Now it's predictable, right? You can consistently grow, understanding what you need to adjust, where you're underperforming, and how can we get back, get the traction back that can drive us towards full census expansion and beyond. So give it a try. It will give you control. You're not now just rely on hope a hope marketing strategy. It's not just your gut feeling or your agency giving you promises of what you should be doing. Put the numbers behind it. And if you want my team to audit your numbers or help you build the growth plan based on the areas of opportunity we identified today, then just hit us up, send me a message, send us a message. Our details are in the show notes below. And of course, last but not least, as always, if you found this episode valuable, please make sure to subscribe, follow, and share it with one of your colleagues, one of your peers, fellow facility owner, CEO, admissions leader who could benefit from this session. Thanks again for turning into the Elevate podcast. I'm your host, Gary Garth. Stay focused, stay data driven, and I'll see you in the next episode.